Hello, I know last week I said that with As Imperceptibly as Grief, that was our final poem, but then some lovely people in my class reminded me that we didn't do She Walks in Beauty earlier on in the year. So if you've hooked into this video and you're in one of the other Year 10 classes, obviously if you've already done this poem, you don't have to watch this video, but you might want to watch it anyway just to recap it, or you may have been absent when it was done in your own classes. Because I'm going to also be filming another video after this one about what I'd like you to do with the anthology poetry over the summer holidays before you're back in September. I'm going to sort of skip the vocabulary bit of the lesson just for speed and time really. So today we're going to be analysing how Byron presents the themes of love and relationships and nature in She Walks in Beauty. So as usual, we're going to look at the context. Who was Byron? Why did he write She Walks in Beauty? How Byron uses language, form and structure to present ideas about love and relationships and nature in the poem. So Lord Byron then, he was a very interesting and controversial character. He was born in 1788 and died in 1824. He was 36 years old. So another one of these poets that died reasonably young. Remember, Shelley died age 29, Keats died age 26. It just tended to sort of be this romantic thing that happened to some of these poets, this sort of live hard, die young, a rock star sort of mantra, although of course poor John Keats had tuberculosis and died, and Shelley drowned, and actually Byron died of a fever, which we'll get onto in a little bit. So he was known as mad, bad and dangerous to know. He had a pretty notorious reputation, did Byron, and it was actually one of his past lovers who coined that famous phrase, and it's a good phrase to write down and to use when writing about the context of this poem: mad, bad and dangerous to know. He was a romantic poet, the sort of second generation of the romantic poets, if you like Keats, Shelley, Byron, writing a little bit after you know, Wordsworth and William Blake, for example, but he was a romantic poet, so he believed all of the same sorts of things that the romantic poets believed in. We know that they worshipped nature. We know that they often had creative or unusual spiritual or religious beliefs. Like Shelley, Byron did not believe in God. He rejected the sort of traditional values of society and Christianity, and he believed that actually the way you lived your life was a form of art, and that actually you only get one life on this earth probably, and you should live it to its extremes, and you should experience everything that life has to offer you, even if those sensations or those experiences weren't something that polite society thought you should be indulging in or should be doing. And you know, he lived his life the way he did, which then inspired his poetry. So whilst particularly as a woman, I suppose, when you think about all the things that Byron got up to and his sort of the way he treated a lot of, you know, he had a lot of lovers, he had a lot of girlfriends. He's also someone whose lifestyle was certainly admired at the time, because he was doing things that other people were too afraid to do because of the way society would judge them. So he was a politician in the sense that he got his title was inherited. You know, he was a lord, for example, and he was also a revolutionary in his later life, and he in fact died fighting for Greek independence, and he died of a fever that he caught on the battlefield. So, you know, he was like William Blake. He wanted people to sort of rise up and overthrow their oppressors, Byron, you know, did believe in freedom, as did the Romantic poets, the beauty of freedom, the beauty of art. They didn't want people to lead a restricted life. So Byron is considered to be the first modern celebrity, if you like. He was famous both for his writing, but also for his lifestyle and the way he chose to live his life. You know, nowadays he would be your sort of, I don't know, sex, drugs and rock and roll type, you know, an attractive man that everyone fancied, who sort of did all of these extreme things and would probably be in the tabloids, but people would romanticize even the bad things that he did. You know, he had so many adoring fans. You know, women would completely throw themselves at him and write him sort of love letters, getting him to meet up with them in secret. You know, people were completely obsessed with him in the way that some people are with rock stars or pop stars or film stars, or whoever now. So he was involved in a number of sex scandals, including affairs with rich married women and also with men. And we need to remember that homosexuality was illegal at the time. So, you know, he really, like Shelley, didn't believe in being tied down through monogamy or marriage. He did believe in having multiple partners, in having open relationships. You know, he wasn't someone who would do the traditional get married, have children. He did, in fact, have a wife who he became estranged from, and she took him to court, and it was all of, and she's in fact the one that accused him of having sex with men as a way to try and disgrace him, and because of course it was illegal at the time. Byron eventually sort of fled England really for Europe. He felt that he needed to, the lifestyle and the attention almost got a little bit too much for him. So he did sort of eventually go to places in Europe and sort of stay there. And whilst a lot of the scandal and the fame followed him, it obviously wasn't quite as intense as when he was in England. He allegedly became involved with his half sister, which was an accusation thrown against him, which is obviously incest, and equally had several illegitimate children, which is unsurprising considering the amount of women he probably slept with. Illegitimate means that you're born outside of marriage in those days, which again was a scandal. He had a deformed foot that he was very sensitive and very self-conscious of. And some critics believe that's why he was so obsessed with beauty and beautiful things, which is of course linking into the poem. He was friends with lots of famous writers at the time across Europe. He was friends with Shelley, who wrote Ozymandias that we looked at a few weeks ago, as well as Mary Shelley, his wife, who wrote Frankenstein. His doctor, a guy called John Polidori, wrote a novel called The Vampire, which predates Dracula. And the Count, Lord Ruthven, the vampire, was actually modelled on Byron and the sort of way he was viewed as preying on sort of young rich women at these parties, much in the way a vampire might prey on its victims. So, you know, he was someone that was friends with a lot of creative people. So allegedly, again, no one knows for certain, but it is believed that She Walks in Beauty, the poem we're going to look at today, is written about Byron meeting his cousin's wife for the first time at a party. And he was so struck by her beauty that he literally went off that night and composed this poem. Also, it said, you know, we're led to believe. She was wearing a black dress because she was in mourning, and that was the sort of custom at the time. You know, if someone close to you died, you would wear black for a certain period of time. It's a sort of tribute to them. And what particularly struck him about the image of her was the contrast of her beauty against this sort of all black that she was wearing. And it was that contrast of the dark and the light that he found so beautiful and that inspired him to write the poem. And we see lots of imagery and juxtaposition of dark and light in the poem to reflect that. So as I said earlier, he died of a fever aged 36, which he caught when fighting in the Greek war for their independence. So he did eventually go and join this war to try and let the Greek people sort of have their freedom, and he contracted a fever on the battlefield and died. So yet another romantic poet who died before their time. Led a very turbulent, tricky life, mainly due to his own decisions, ultimately, but he chose to live his life through extreme emotions, through celebrating beauty and art in whatever way you could get it, really. And whilst, you know, I've always felt with the romantic poets on one level, I've always found them totally fascinating as a group of people, because there's something to admire about the ways they did live their lives and the way they did break out of conventional society. But on another level, they were all pretty overprivileged. You know, they may have been rejected by their families like Shelley was, but, you know, they came from money, they had those excellent educations. And, you know, many of them would have left complete heartache and devastation behind them based on the way they lived their lives. I mean, remember Shelley's first wife drowned and believed to have killed herself. So anyway, they are a fascinating group of people, and there's a reason why 5 of our 18 poems are by romantic poets. And for those of you that may be considering doing English at A-level, it is likely that you will explore further into the romantic poets then. So I'm going to switch over to the visualizer, and we are going to annotate She Walks in Beauty now. Okay, so as always, we look at the title, She Walks in Beauty. Now, we can see that this is taken from the first line of the poem, but it's also interesting to think about why he's used, you know, a present tense verb. Present tense meaning that it sort of feels like it's happening right in this moment. Now what this is doing is it's suggesting her beauty is continuous and permanent, almost like he has immortalized her beauty forever in this poem. You know, she may get old and her beauty may fade, she may die, but her beauty is made immortal, made eternal in this poem. Now, the romantic poets, particularly people like Keats and Shelley and Byron, they had a real fascination with immortality because many of them had lost their belief in God, and therefore the comfort of believing in religion is that you have a belief that there is something that happens to you after you die. And if you don't have that belief, then the concept of when you die it just being the end can be a frightening one. So what they really replaced God with was both the worship of nature, but also this idea that through art, and that art could be a poem, a sculpture, a painting, you are immortal. Now, we're doing Lord Byron's poem hundreds of years after he wrote it, so you could argue they're absolutely right. You can achieve immortality through art. So he's almost giving her beauty immortality. And that, you know, we can get all of that from the present tense verb. Her beauty walks, it will forever walk in this poem. It didn't walk, you know, it's not in the past. Her beauty is always present because of the poem, and that would be a really great way to open any sort of essay on this, and you could link that really heavily into the context of this romantic ideal of the eternal. So she walks in beauty like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies. Now we've got a couple of things we want to pick up on then. We have the fact that we have a simile. So a simile is when two things are compared. So her beauty is compared to being like the night. So he's saying here, her beauty is like a clear, you know, starlit night sky. Now it's making her seem very mysterious, and this could be because maybe Byron doesn't know her very well. So she's someone who's very mysterious to him. But you know, there's this real idea as well with the starry sky. You know, stars are associated, you know, with beauty, but also with light. And when we think of light, we think of goodness and innocence. So what we have here is the start of the juxtaposition or the contrast of dark and light. And remember, in the context we talked about it being the juxtaposition of her beauty and the black dress that she's wearing. We see him do that throughout this poem. It's this idea of, you know, the contrast that he felt was particularly striking about her. So you have the night sky, but also the stars as well. So she is someone that is both mysterious, but also someone who is beautiful as well. And we see throughout this poem, there's two ways to read it. You know, is he writing this poem as a non-sexual worship of her beauty, like you would talk about a painting, or is he writing this poem because he, you know, finds her desirable and a potential partner? Because it wouldn't be the first, you know, the fact that she was married to his cousin probably wouldn't stop him if he really wanted her. So which one is it? And there's equal readings for both, and that's why, you know, you could say the night is associated with you know, darkness and even possibly, you know, sexuality. This idea that if you want to do something no one's going to approve of, then you should do it under the cover of darkness, you know, at night. But then we have the light imagery, which is very innocent and very pure. So it's that contrast and sort of switching between the two. We also have the alliteration here of cloudless climes and starry skies, and that alliteration gives it a very romantic, very melodic sort of feel. And actually She Walks in Beauty was originally written to go to music, so that could be why it's got this almost melodic song-like feel as well. And all that's best of dark and bright meet in her aspect and her eyes. So what he's saying here is she has all of the best elements of night and day, and that's what makes her so beautiful. And her aspect is just, you know, her whole, you know, body, her image. And then of course we have the eyes, which is a very romantic image as well. So then we have, thus mellowed to that tender light, which heaven to gaudy day denies. Now tender, again, it's giving this impression of being very, you know, soft and beautiful. Oh, beauty. Don't know why I've just made that into a Y. soft and beautiful. And then we have this last line of this first stanza, which heaven to gaudy day denies. Now if something's gaudy, then it's sort of too bright and sort of showy, really tacky. So what he could be doing here is criticising sort of typical views and representations of love. It was far more normal, if you were going to compare a woman's beauty to something, you'd compare it to the day and not the night. So it could be here that he's actually criticising not only the views of society's sort of view of love and relationships, which we knew he disagreed because he broke that sort of conventional morality by sort of being with whoever and how many people he wanted at any one time, but also again in literature, you know, it's almost like he's criticising this convention of, well, only the day is beautiful. What about the night? There's beauty to be found in the night, and there's beauty to be found in unconventional relationships and unconventional ways of life. So it could very much, you could make some strong contextual links with Byron's lifestyle choices there. So now we have the second stanza then. One shade the more, one ray the less, had half impaired the nameless grace which waves in every raven tress. So what we have here in this first line, one shade the more, one ray the less, is he's using something called antithesis. And this is basically opposite ideas presented in a repeated structure. So we've got one shade the more, one ray the less. So we can see that more and less, and then shade and ray have just been those sorts of opposite things, because shade is darkness, ray is light, more is obviously more of something, less is the opposite. So we've got these opposite things. That's what we sort of mean by antithesis, really. So what this is doing here is it's basically highlighting how delicately her beauty is balanced. If it was just one ray brighter or one shade darker, it wouldn't be that sort of perfectly poised beauty, a unique beauty that it is. Then we had half impaired the nameless grace which waves in every raven tress. This is such a romantic imagery here. So nameless would suggest that, you know, her beauty is beyond words. And waves, again, is another present tense verb, like walks at the start. You know, it's like, again, her beauty will forever be alive. Then raven is basically, you know, black. And then tress is hair. So it's also talking about her beauty, the beauty of her dark hair as well. So it's a very specific thing that he's describing about her physical appearance. Or softly lightens o'er her face, where thoughts serenely sweet express how pure, how dear their dwelling place. Now what he's saying here is, you know, basically her outward beauty represents her inner beauty. So he's now not just commenting on her attractiveness, he's commenting on almost the beauty of her soul or the person she is. We have words like serene, mean calm, obviously words like pure we associate again with innocent, dear, you know, these are very positive words. He has a positive impression not just about her physical appearance but also about the type of person that she is. He imagines her thoughts are serenely sweet. You know, this is someone that doesn't have a negative mindset or hateful thoughts. They're very pure, calm, sweet, innocent. So again, you can interpret this in multiple ways. Is he finding her beauty and her innocence, again, something really powerful that he wants to worship as a work of art? Or is he finding that innocence and that serenity and that calmness and that pureness very attractive as a sort of potential romantic partner? So as always, there's the two ways of viewing it. So the final verse then. And on that cheek and o'er that brow, so soft, so calm, yet eloquent, the smiles that win, the tints that glow, that tell of days in goodness spent, a mind at peace with all below, a heart whose love is innocent. We're going to look at this more as a collective now. Now, the first thing I want us to think about is the technique of sibilance. Now, as with lots of things when it comes to English, there are these sort of scary looking words which are actually quite straightforward. Sibilance is simply the repetition of a sound. Okay, think back to your phonics. So we've got so much here, so soft. In fact, we're going to highlight them. So soft, so calm, yet eloquent, the smiles that win, the tints that glow, but tell of days in goodness spent, a mind at peace with all below, a heart whose love is innocent. Now, I know technically they're C's and not S's, but they still give that phonetic. So what you could say Byron's doing here is that it creates a sort of calm, soothing mood, you know, which is reflective of her pure thoughts. You know, it's interesting that he's moved away now from her physical beauty, and we're going to pick up again on that in a minute. So what we also have here is the semantic field I can't write today, always. Semantic field of positivity. We have, you know, think of all these positive words: soft, calm, eloquent, smiles, win, tints, glow, goodness, peace, heart, love, innocent. You know, these are all positive things. And what he's saying here is that actually he's celebrating not just her beauty, but her personality, you know, her purity and goodness. And what he's essentially doing with a heart whose love is innocent is that, you know, he could be, and again this sort of links back to this, I suppose, what he could be saying here is actually, you know, vanity or your appearance doesn't matter. You know, it's about inner beauty, and by the end of the poem it's her inner beauty that he chooses to end the poem with, you know, he's most struck with. Now, like always, you know, we have sort of two interpretations, you know, here. You know, number one, he is, you know, worshipping her beauty and goodness like you would a work of art, which would make sense for a romantic. Or number two, you know, the womanizer in him is sexually attracted to her and wants to corrupt her innocence. And again, it's sort of up to you which interpretation you believe. There's no right or wrong here. The beauty of poetry, once you have the confidence, you can interpret it how you want, as long as you can justify it through, you know, your language analysis. If someone asked me what I think, I actually think it's a bit of both. I actually think, you know, you don't behave like someone, you don't behave like Byron did without being someone who's probably deeply troubled and unhappy. I do expect he was attracted to her sexually simply because of the type of man he was, but he was as attracted to her physically as much as he was for her purity. Maybe, you know, the sort of, you know, by being with someone like her, some of that purity and that goodness might have almost infected him with some of that goodness himself, because, you know, or maybe I've just read too many romanticised versions of literary figures like Lord Byron, who knows. But, you know, he is the Byronic hero is a literary trope, you know, this sort of attractive, tortured bad boy that sort of everyone fancies, but equally, you know, women think, oh well, the love of a good woman will convert him and will change him, and I'm going to be the woman to do that. You know, you see that in so many films and books and TV shows, and you know, that sort of Byronic hero, a lot of it stems back to a man like Byron. So we could view both interpretations just as equally. So that brings us to the end of She Walks in Beauty. It is with this video that you all absolutely could have you chosen to follow my YouTube videos during lockdown. You should now have a full anthology. And what I'd like you to do now is now go to the next video, which I'm going to go away and film now, which is saying what I want you to do before September. Now you have all of these poems completed. Okay, but well done, particularly if you are someone who has kept up with these videos. You know, you should feel massively proud of yourself, because it is not easy, and it hasn't been easy at all. So well done.